They were 5 women whose voices could make a crowd cry, vibrant, bold, and full of life. Their harmonies were the sound of celebration, love, and Mexican pride. But one summer evening in 2003, as they packed their instruments and costumes for a wedding performance just outside Palm Desert, they vanished. No phone calls, no vehicle, no trace of where they went. For 6 long years, their families begged for answers, until one day, in 2009, a construction crew unearthed something beneath an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Indio. What they found stopped every investigator in their tracks. A tunnel. And inside it, the remnants of a secret no one was ever meant to find. Today's story is one of the most haunting cases I've ever come across. The disappearance of an entire all-female mariachi band from Los Angeles, whose sudden vanishing in 2003 left both fans and police baffled for years. Before we dive deep into this tragic story, please take a moment to support the channel. Make sure you like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming true mystery breakdowns. Your support truly helps us continue bringing these stories to light and honoring those who can no longer speak for themselves. In the heart of East Los Angeles, there was once a group known as Las Estrellas de Oro, the Golden Stars. 5 talented young women, aged between 20 and 30, who had grown up surrounded by music, tradition, and the warmth of family gatherings filled with guitars, violins, and tequila songs. For years, they played at quinceañeras, small-town festivals, and weddings, slowly gaining recognition for being one of the few all-female mariachi bands in Southern California at the time. But behind the smiles and music videos shot on borrowed cameras, there were dreams and debts. They wanted more gigs, more exposure, and a record deal that could lift them out of financial struggle. So, when a mysterious booking came in for a private wedding performance near the Salton Sea, paying 5 times their usual rate, they didn't hesitate. It was supposed to be the gig that changed everything. Instead, it became the one that ended it all. They called themselves Las Estrellas de Oro, the Golden Stars. 5 women who were more like sisters than bandmates. Lucia Vargas, 27, the leader and violinist. Calm, elegant, and protective of the group. Marisol Cordero, 25, the lead singer, whose voice could silence a crowd. Daniela "Danny" Reyes, 22, the youngest, always with her camera, recording every show. Sofia Aranda, 29, guitarist, the quiet one, often lost in her notebook. Elena Torres, 31, the trumpet player, the oldest, who handled the band's bookings. They had just released their first demo CD in the spring of 2003. Nothing fancy, just 6 songs recorded in a borrowed studio behind a taco shop in Boyle Heights. But it was enough to get small attention from Spanish-language radio stations in Los Angeles. Lucia was the dreamer of the group. She told her friends, "If this keeps going, we'll tour across the border by next year. Mexico City, Guadalajara, imagine it." They didn't know that dream would never come true. It was May 16, 2003, a Friday evening, when Elena received the booking call. A man introduced himself as Antonio Serrano, claiming to represent a wealthy family who wanted a mariachi band for a private wedding in a small desert town near the Salton Sea. The offer was generous, $2,000 cash up front, plus transportation, food, and lodging for the night. Elena hesitated. She'd never heard of the client before, but the man knew their names, their songs, even the venues they'd played. He said he'd seen them at a wedding in Riverside the month before. The only unusual part? He asked them not to bring anyone else, no assistants, no sound crew. The family wants a very private celebration, he said. Still, it was hard to turn down. $2,000 cash for one night? That was more than what they usually made in 3 months. Lucia agreed. They packed their instruments, their matching blue charro suits, and Marisol's camera, the one she used to record everything for our future documentary, she'd always say. They left Los Angeles around 6:40 p.m. in Lucia's white 1999 Ford Econoline van. That was the last confirmed time anyone ever saw them alive. It's a 3-hour drive from East LA to the Salton Sea. The band had made that route before for small gigs. But that night, the air was unusually dry and the highway unusually empty. At 8:15 p.m., Lucia called her brother, Raphael, from her Nokia cell phone. She said they were passing through Palm Springs and expected to arrive by 9 o'clock. She sounded cheerful. Background music was playing in the van. At 8:42 p.m., a highway camera near Thermal, California, caught a grainy image of what appeared to be their white van heading east. That was the last known trace. When the women failed to call home that night, no one panicked at first. They often returned late from gigs. But by the following morning, when none of them answered their phones, family members began calling hospitals, towing companies, even roadside services. No one had seen the van. No one had reported an accident. By Sunday, May 18th, families drove out toward the desert themselves, searching. Lucia's brother and Marisol's fiancé covered every gas station from Palm Springs to Brawley. Not one person remembered seeing 5 women dressed in mariachi suits. The desert seemed to have swallowed them whole. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department opened an official missing persons case 3 days later. Detectives initially suspected foul play but had little to work with. Their phones had gone offline simultaneously around 8:45 p.m. that night. Their bank cards showed no further activity. Their van, a 1999 white Ford, was never recovered. Flyers were printed. Spanish-language radio hosts ran emotional pleas to the public. For months, there were tips, sightings of a band of women playing at a cantina in Mexicali, or performing under new names in Arizona, but none were verified. Their disappearance gained local attention but faded as months passed. By the end of 2003, the band members' families still left their instruments untouched, violins gathering dust, trumpets lying in open cases. Their parents never moved houses. They believed their daughters would one day walk through the door again. By early 2004, the case took strange turns. A former promoter claimed that one of the women, Sophia, had mentioned being uncomfortable with their last booking, saying the client sounded off. Another witness, a gas station attendant near Coachella, told police he saw a van full of women around 8:30 p.m. on the night they vanished. They looked lost. He said one of them came inside to buy water and asked, "Is there another road to La Palmera?" No one knew what La Palmera meant. It didn't appear on any map. Detectives believed it might have been the name of the wedding estate, or even a decoy location. Time passed, and the case grew cold. By 2006, the missing women's families had run out of savings, printing flyers and hiring private investigators who found nothing. No phone records, no sightings, no ransom calls. The only thing recovered was one of Marisol's trumpet mouthpieces, discovered in a pawn shop in Indio 2 years later. The shop owner couldn't recall who sold it. Police tested it for fingerprints. There were none. Locals around the Salton Sea often told stories of strange activity at night, unmarked vans, flickering lights in abandoned buildings, and deep tunnels once used decades earlier for smuggling routes. But without evidence, detectives couldn't connect those rumors to Las Estrellas de Oro. By 2007, the public had largely forgotten about the band. Until the summer of 2009, when a construction crew digging beneath an abandoned citrus warehouse on the outskirts of Indio struck concrete that shouldn't have been there. What they uncovered was a hidden entrance, sealed shut with cinder blocks and old steel plates. Behind it was a tunnel. And inside that tunnel lay the evidence that would reopen one of California's most haunting unsolved disappearances. It was June 12, 2009, when the call came into the Indio Police Department. Construction workers had been clearing the remains of a long-abandoned fruit packing warehouse, one that had sat empty since the late 1980s. As they began digging to remove an old drainage line, a backhoe struck something solid. At first, they thought it was just a slab of concrete, until one of the workers noticed a hollow sound beneath it. A few minutes later, after scraping away dirt and debris, they found it, a small metal door, welded shut and painted over. When one of the crew foremen called the site manager to ask what to do, the manager told them to stop work and contact the police immediately. By the time detectives arrived, dust still hung thick in the air, and the heat inside the warehouse was suffocating. Officers from Indio PD, along with 2 detectives from Riverside County Sheriff's Department, pried the door open. A gust of cold, stale air spilled out. Behind the doorway was a narrow staircase leading downward into darkness. They called for backup, protective gear, and flashlights. As the first officer descended, his camera light reflected off cement walls covered in plastic sheeting. At the bottom, the tunnel branched in 2 directions, one toward the east, another toward the south. The smell was overwhelming. At the far end of the southern corridor, investigators found what looked like a makeshift room, an area reinforced with metal panels and crude wiring for electricity. Inside that room, they made the first shocking discovery. Lying on a rotted wooden table were musical instruments, a violin, a trumpet, and a guitar, all covered in a thin layer of dust. They looked aged, forgotten, but recognizable. When one of the detectives photographed the scene and sent the image to the Missing Persons Division, a stunned silence followed. The markings on the guitar matched those belonging to Sofia Aranda, one of the missing women from Las Estrellas de Oro. As officers cleared further inside, they found another section of the tunnel, wider this time, with wooden beams holding the ceiling. On the ground, half buried in dust, lay a blue embroidered mariachi jacket, the kind worn by the band on their last night. The name, Lucia, was hand-stitched in gold thread along the inside collar. That was when investigators knew. This tunnel was connected to the disappearance of the 5 women who vanished 6 years earlier. Forensic teams spent days excavating the area. They mapped the tunnel system, a twisting network stretching nearly 200 meters underground, connecting to an old storm drain that ran beneath the warehouse and toward a dry riverbed. At the farthest point, sealed behind a wooden barrier, they found human remains, partial skeletons, scraps of fabric, and fragments of jewelry. DNA tests later confirmed the worst. They belonged to Lucia Vargas, Marisol Cordero, and Sofia Aranda. The remains of Danny Reyes and Elena Torres were never found. The discovery stunned the entire community. With the new evidence, detectives from the Cold Case Unit reopened the file. They traced property records, looking for anyone who might have owned or leased the warehouse between 2002 and 2004. What they found led them to a man named Carlos Mendez, a former event organizer who disappeared from Los Angeles around the same time the band did. Mendez had booked dozens of mariachi groups across California in the late 1990s. But by 2003, he'd fallen off the radar. His last known residence? An old trailer home 20 minutes from that same warehouse. When police dug deeper, they discovered that Mendez had been linked to human trafficking operations between California and Mexico in the early 2000s, routes that allegedly used underground tunnels near the border. Authorities began to suspect that the band had been lured into the desert under false pretenses, not for a wedding, but for something far darker. Inside the tunnel, crime scene techs recovered several other items. A cassette recorder labeled Practice 2003. A hairbrush containing long brown strands of hair. And one Polaroid photograph showing what appeared to be the women inside a small room, their instruments beside them, expressions tense, as if posing under duress. The handwriting on the back read, Fiesta de la Luna, May 16th. No one has ever determined who took that photograph. News of the discovery spread fast. Within hours, Spanish-language media stations across California were broadcasting the story. Families who had waited 6 long years gathered outside the Indio police station, some praying, others screaming, demanding answers. Lucia's mother fainted when detectives confirmed her daughter's necklace, a silver heart pendant engraved Para Siempre, was among the items found. Marisol's fiancé broke down during the press conference, saying through tears, "We kept their music alive because we thought they'd come back. Now all we have is silence." The heartbreak reignited outrage across the Latino music community. Investigators soon determined that the tunnel was likely an abandoned smuggling route once used in the late 1990s by a trafficking ring operating across California and Mexico. But here's what made the case truly disturbing. The tunnel had acoustic insulation, small mirrors, and faded paper posters on the wall, scenes of music, stages, and bright lights. Detectives believed the women may have been forced to perform, possibly recorded, before being silenced. No official footage was ever recovered, but small fragments of magnetic tape were found melted into the tunnel floor. As for Carlos Mendez, the supposed promoter who booked their final show, he was never located. In 2010, U.S. Marshals traced records showing a man with his name had crossed into Baja California under a forged ID and vanished. Some locals claimed to have seen him living near Ensenada, working as a mechanic, but nothing was proven. The case remains open to this day. In Los Angeles, friends of the band organized a memorial concert the following year. It was held in the same community center where Las Estrellas de Oro had performed their very first show. 5 empty chairs were placed on stage, one for each missing woman. Their instruments rested on top, polished, reflecting the stage lights. As the performance ended, the audience rose in silence. The final song played that night was Cielito Lindo, sung softly, without words. But there was one final piece of evidence that kept investigators awake long after the tunnel was sealed. A 6th embroidered jacket, smaller than the rest, discovered in a storage room next to the main corridor. It didn't belong to any of the 5 band members. And stitched along the inside collar were 2 words, La Segunda, the second. To this day, no one knows who it belonged to, or if another band had been taken before them. The discovery beneath that warehouse changed everything. But it didn't bring peace. Not to the families. Not to the investigators. And certainly not to the community that had adored those 5 women. For months, people visited the site, leaving flowers and candles at the chain-link fence that surrounded it. The words, Nunca Olvidadas, never forgotten, were spray-painted across the warehouse's rusted walls. Yet despite all the renewed attention, the truth of what happened inside that tunnel was never fully uncovered. Every answer only seemed to raise more questions. News outlets swarmed Indio and Los Angeles. Television vans lined the streets outside the sheriff's office, reporters battling desert heat for sound bites from detectives or grieving relatives. Within days, headlines flooded Spanish-language media. Entire all-female mariachi band found in desert tunnel. 6-year mystery ends in tragic discovery. The story went viral across Mexico and the U.S., becoming a symbol of both cultural pride and horror. But police, pressed for answers, struggled with the lack of conclusive evidence. There were no fingerprints, no working cameras, and no confirmed living witnesses. What remained was a nightmare stitched together from fragments of evidence, a vanished suspect, musical instruments, and the bodies of 3 of the 5 women. For Lucia's mother, the discovery was not closure, it was torture. She told a reporter. They took her voice. They buried her music. How do you heal from silence? Marisol's fiancé, once a mariachi musician himself, never performed again. He kept her microphone in a glass case, never dusted, never touched. Danny's camera was never found, but her parents continued to believe it held the final footage of their journey, possibly evidence of who took them. Elena's husband, a truck driver, spent years driving the same desert roads where her van was last seen, pulling over at abandoned motels and gas stations, convinced he might one day find a trace of her. But by 2015, the case had drifted back into silence, much like the desert wind that carried their last song away. To this day, there are three main theories that investigators and independent journalists debate. Theory 1. The trafficking setup. The most widely accepted theory is that the women were lured under false pretenses by a group tied to cross-border human trafficking. The fake booking call, the sudden disappearance, and the tunnel's design all pointed toward organized crime involvement. The women may have been kidnapped upon arrival, taken into the warehouse, and forced underground. But why target a mariachi band? Some investigators believe they were used as bait or leverage against someone higher up, perhaps a client who owed money. Yet no ransom demand was ever made, and no cartel ever claimed responsibility. This theory emerged after police analyzed the Polaroid found in the tunnel, the one labeled Fiesta de la Luna. According to some investigators, the photo resembled a staged performance area lit by portable lamps. There are unconfirmed rumors that certain private parties took place in hidden desert locations during the early 2000s, gatherings where guests paid to watch secret performances before disappearing back into the night. If Las Estrellas de Oro were taken there, the performance could have been forced, their final show played for an audience they never chose. Afterward, they may have been silenced to keep that secret buried forever. It's a theory no one wants to believe, but one that fits too many details. A far less publicized theory suggests personal revenge. In 2002, before their disappearance, the band had publicly fired their former manager, a man accused of stealing money from their performances and threatening to ruin them. He was later identified as a cousin of a known associate of Carlos Mendez, the promoter who booked their final gig. Could the fake wedding have been part of a revenge plan that spiraled into something far darker? Detectives have never confirmed the connection, but the timing and proximity were suspicious. Even now, some believe the tunnel wasn't built for trafficking, but rather repurposed to dispose of victims from multiple crimes. In 2011, 2 years after the tunnel was sealed and the investigation went cold again, hikers discovered a white van buried beneath sand dunes near the edge of the Salton Sea, about 14 miles from the original site. The VIN number confirmed it was Lucia's Ford Econoline. Inside, police found fragments of blue fabric matching the band's mariachi uniforms. But what chilled investigators most was the discovery of a torn set list tucked into the glove compartment, handwritten by Marisol. The last song on the list was circled 3 times. It reads simply, "Por tu amor," for your love. Years later, a recording engineer named Luis Pena, who had once helped the women record their demo CD, found an old cassette labeled Studio Rough 2003 among his archives. When he played it, static filled the speakers, followed by faint laughter, tuning instruments, and Marisol's voice saying, "Someday we'll listen to this and laugh at how bad it sounds." Then, their music began. A slightly out-of-sync, raw, but powerful rendition of Cielito Lindo. It was the last known recording of Las Estrellas de Oro. Luis later released it online under the title La Canción que Nunca Terminaron, the song they never finished. Within days, it went viral. Thousands of listeners around the world left messages. for the women who sang until the end. Your voices will never be silenced again. The warehouse site remains sealed, fenced off, and officially listed as private property. No one is allowed to enter. But locals still say that on quiet nights, when the wind moves through the metal fencing, it sounds like distant music, faint notes of a trumpet, the echo of a violin. Some claim it's just wind. Others believe the music of Las Estrellas de Oro still lives there, trapped beneath layers of earth and forgotten time. Stories like this remind us that behind every headline are people, friends, sisters, daughters, and mothers. Women who loved, who dreamed, who believed their art could make the world a little brighter. But evil often hides behind opportunity. And sometimes, the most innocent dream, a simple wedding performance, can lead into the darkest places imaginable. Lucia once wrote in her notebook, "Music is a promise that will be remembered long after we're gone." And she was right. Their music still plays. Their names are still spoken. Their faces, forever part of a story that asks the same haunting question. How can 5 women vanish in plain sight, and no one notice until it's far too late? Thank you for staying with me through this emotional story. If you believe their story deserves to be heard, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Every click, every comment, helps these voices stay alive, and reminds the world that the disappeared are never truly forgotten. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and as always, we'll meet again in the next mystery.